Well, with the spring game on Saturday, we're all excited to see Will Stein's offense. He's in year one as the Ducks offensive coordinator. He's under a lot of pressure, too, and expectations. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day if you're watching on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. Remember that goal I have on YouTube by the time the season starts. Let's get to 3,000. Thank you all so much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So the week of an Oregon football game of sorts is finally here. And I was thinking about our offensive coordinator, and one of you were as well. I think the pressure on Will Stein is very real. And it's real for several reasons. And I want to start with this question that came in. You can always send a mailbag question, by the way. YouTube comments, Twitter at @Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. This one from Dennis Hazlitt. Hi, Spencer. I hope this isn't a dated topic. Not at all. It's perfect. But I wanted to get your reaction to something. I listen to all the Duck podcasts I can get my hands on, including yours. And something I've been hearing as a recurring theme is the catchphrase, plays are overrated. That coming from Will Stein. And we need to get the ball to our players, etc., in reference to new OC Stein's philosophy. I'm as anxious as the next guy to see what happens on offense this year, but I just want to pump the brakes on that because it seems to me we just transitioned away from a philosophy that de-emphasized play calling, Mario Cristobal, in favor of, quote, doing things the right way, in which play calling, strategy, and sequencing took center stage, Kenny Dillingham. And I know which version most Duck fans preferred. I certainly did not feel that plays were overrated when we played against Chip Kelly and UCLA at Autzen this past year. I saw opportunistic play calling and game-long strategy that seized the initiative and gave us a huge win on the national spotlight and changed the narrative of our season. All right, so lengthy question there, but you know what? That's okay because I love the thoughts. I love hearing what you guys all have to say there. And I agree with a lot of what you said in there. And in regards to the dichotomy between just get the ball to your players and just have the plays, I don't think players are as much without a great or proper play call or philosophy, right? We saw that in the difference between 2021 Troy Franklin and 2022 Troy Franklin. Now, is there an element of, taking that sophomore leap and him becoming a better player? Yeah, sure. But he was a radically different player from one season to the next because you had a different offensive philosophy and your play calling was better. Now, your play calling is, of course, going to be designed sometimes to get the ball to one specific guy where, Troy Franklin's the primary read or Bucky Irving's the primary read. Other times you're going to have plays where it's, this read, then that read, and it's not necessarily one specific guy. Depends on what the defense is giving you. But I think overall, like I've heard Stein give these notions of, play calling is overrated. It's about players. It's about both. I think that is a pretty even split in my view, 50-50. You can't be a great player if you don't have good play calling. And if your play calling isn't good, you're not going to have a great player. So those two things very much feed off of one another. And it's the dynamic between coaching and the players that makes production on the field. I don't think it's just one or the other. And, this idea that, well, you just got to have great players, right? You just got to have great players, which I'll touch on in a moment. You have to know when to call each play. This sounds very simple, but it kind of goes against what we have been hearing to Dennis's point on this front about, play calling versus the players and personnel. The old adage is it the Jimmies and the Joes or the X's and the O's? The answer to me is it's pretty clearly both. And that's not a cop-out response. I would give that response at any point in time because that's the way it is. Like, you can make the right play call, but if you don't have the player to make the play, it's not going to matter. And if you have a great player who has great potential, but he's not put in a situation to succeed, it also doesn't matter if he's a talented player, right? Bo Nix is clearly a really good college football player. He wasn't put in a position to succeed at Auburn. He was last year at Oregon. The numbers reflected that. So when you look at Stein and hear him talk about this stuff, like play calling is still going to matter, which brings me to the point that I raised here to begin the show. I think there's a lot of pressure on Will Stein in year one, because when you look at this Oregon roster, and yeah, we still have tight ends questions. Varkey's Gums ended up choosing Arkansas. So Oregon's still after a transfer portal tight end. I think Malcolm Epps at USC would be a great option, as I've discussed previously on the show, as everydayers know. So when you look across the board at this offense, yes, you have a new O-line coach, and yes, you have a lot of new players on the offensive line. So I'll give you some leeway on that front. But overall, there's no reason for Oregon's offense to not be at least 85 to 90% as productive as it was a season ago. You've got everything in place. You don't have a 6th-year center. You don't have that continuity on the offensive line, which is why I'll give you a buffer zone. Oregon was putting up, 40 plus points in, 7 or 8 straight games. Like, if you don't do that, I'm not going to hold it against you. But there's no realistic world, barring major injuries, where I think we as fans should look at Will Stein as the offensive coordinator and say, it's just year one. Because I've seen what a really good offensive coordinator can do in year one with a new team. That was Kenny Dillingham last year, who was not perfect, right? Had some red zone issues, of course, had the stumble on the last drive with what Lanning later admitted was kind of predictable play calling in inside the 10-yard line against Oregon State and whatnot. Like, there were moments where you look at it and go, okay, yeah, this wasn't great. That can improve. But Will Stein's got all the tools that he needs. You've got a 5th-year quarterback who has started coming into this year for the 5th consecutive season in college football at the Power 5 level. You've got great running backs, who I'm going to talk about later, that give you everything you need. You don't have continuity on the offensive line, but you've got plenty of talent on the offensive line. And even if your O-line is struggling at points, you as an offensive coordinator should be able to adapt and mitigate that with your play calling and adjustments and whatnot. But again, plenty of talent there. You've got a great number 1 tight end, and you got a bunch of dudes at receiver. There's no scenario that I can see where, if the offense takes a major step back, I could attribute it to anything other than Will Stein. And I don't feel like, because of what Dillingham did last year, we should be able to give him that buffer. And by the way, I think his upside is tremendous as the offensive coordinator, and I expect him to do well. This is not some anti-Will Stein rant, but in terms of our expectations for him as fans, yeah, I think they should be pretty darn high, because he's got everything that he needs. He's got everything that he needs to succeed. Like, if in this offense, with the players that he's got right now, if Will Stein cannot succeed as the OC and play caller at a high level, then you would have to ask questions about, well, what exactly do you need? Because there's just not a whole lot missing here. There really, really is not. And the running backs are certainly a big part of that. And FanDuel is a big part of gambling in America, because they're America's number 1 sports book. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back. There's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's number 1 sports book. Right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up, place your first bet, get $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. You could pick a pitcher to go over in strikeouts. You could pick Aaron Judge to pick up where he left off with a home run from last year. Whatever you want. You can bet the NBA playoffs as well. FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up to get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. So amongst the myriad of weapons that Will Stein is going to have at his disposal this year, Bo Nix, who should be fully healthy, you're going to have some good receivers. You'll have at least one really high-level tight end, should have a good offensive line. But the running backs are arguably the unit that I have the fewest questions about. That includes Bo Nix, by the way. Bo Nix's 2 best years of college football have always come with Kenny Dillingham. He's got to form new chemistry with an offensive coordinator. That can be tricky, but it can also be done. We've seen it happen before. And, Stein also talked about how he doesn't want to change too much from last year's offense because it works so well. That's something that I enjoy hearing because I liked what I saw from the offense last year, aside from too many stumbles down in the red zone. But part of the reason I feel this way about Stein and the pressure being there on our new offensive coordinator is you got a lot of foundational pieces in place. And this running back room, yeah, the offensive line is going to have to produce, but you've got the dudes who can be used in a variety of ways, right? You don't have Byron Cardwell, you don't have Sean Dollars anymore. Dollars played much more than Cardwell last year, which personally I was fine with. But you bring in two freshmen, and Dante Dowdell and Jaden Lamar. But when you look at Oregon's top three running backs, there's just not a whole lot of differential between the three, especially the top two, right? I think Jordan James is on his way. I think Jordan James looks a lot like Noah Whittington. I think whenever Whittington moves on, I think James could be that sort of guy. I like what I've seen from Jordan James. And of course, as a goal line short yardage back, he wasn't good last year. He was great as a true freshman. As a true freshman, you don't see that from a running back a lot. So I like him there. But I look at Bucky Irving, I look at Noah Whittington and say, boy, you just have the tools to be really productive out of the backfield. Both guys can catch the ball. Bucky had those issues at the start of last year catching the ball, but really came on strong as the year went on. He had that long touchdown on fourth down against UCLA. I think it was the one where they cut to Dillingham getting all fired up in the press box and whatnot. That was a part of the offense, and they both can do that. I think they're both good in pass protection. They run the ball well between the tackles. They can go outside. I think Whittington's got a little bit more breakaway speed. And I think Bucky Irving's got a little bit more make you miss between the tackles and kind of getting to that second level. But I think both are such tremendous running backs. And it has to be a comforting thing for Will Stein as well to look in the backfield and say, okay, this is an offense that, Dan Lanning is going to have some influence on. Defensive guys typically want to run the ball a pretty good amount. Those are great guys to be able to run the ball with. And, if Bucky probably is going to take the first snaps, but I really see them as like 1A, 1B. I don't see that as 1 and 2. It reminds me a little bit, not entirely, but as a Portland Trailblazers fan, as my guy Blazer Duck out there knows, he's an everydayer. There were games during the Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum era of Portland Trailblazers basketball, whether it was regular season or postseason, and it could have been either guy's night, right? My friends, my brother and I, we'd text amongst each other during games, and it'd be clear pretty early. Dame's 1 of 7, and CJ's 5 of 8 from the floor, and we'd just say to each other, "It's a CJ game." Or it's a Dame game if those roles were reversed. And there were more Dame games than CJ, but there were days where it looked like CJ had the hotter hand, where he did have the hotter hand. And so he was kind of the focal point of the offense. And that's how I feel with Bucky Irving, Noah Whittington. Like Bucky is your number one, but they have different running styles. They have different traits. And if Noah Whittington is rolling, I don't feel like you need to throw Bucky Irving out there. I mean, we saw that last year. There'd be games where Irving would have 12, 13 carries and Whittington would have 8 to 10. And then Jordan James would have a few and Bo Nix would have a few. And so I love what the running back room has got right now. I also feel great about their depth. If one of Irving or Whittington go down with an injury, which happens at the running back position because it's very physical, of course, I feel great about Jordan James. Like, yeah, he was really good in short yardage situations, but I think he's got even more than that too. Like he's got a next gear. He looked good in the runs that he did have getting to the second level. So I'm a fan of all three, and I think it's a real luxury for us as fans and for Will Stein as the OC to look into his running back room and see not one, not two, but three guys who are experienced, proven, capable, and just really good, hard, physical runners of the football. So I really like what I'm seeing from those guys, and I suspect that'll be kind of the pecking order, in terms of getting carries this Saturday in the spring game and then going forward into the fall as well. I think it'll be, Irving first, Whittington second, play the hot hand a little bit, and then Jordan James probably third. And the two freshman running backs, Jaden Lamar, Dante Dowdell. Dowdell's got a lot more hype, a lot more attention, gets talked about a bit more. He was a more highly coveted recruit coming out of high school a little bit, both 4-star guys, but Dowdell was, I think, noticeably higher rated. I didn't check on that before I taped the show, but that's kind of the perception that we have of him. And I think Dowdell's got immense potential. I wonder how many carries there are going to be for those guys, without an injury to one of those top three. I just feel like it's a tough rotation to crack. Like it's just tough to get carries when you've got three guys that are so talented and so proven as well. Whereas like the wide receiver room, you've got a guy like Tez Johnson, talented but not proven at the Power Five level. Kyler Casper has never played consistently, talented recruit, not proven at the Power Five level. So I think that's a unique room in that sense. I think offensively, if you're talking about depth and talent, reliability, all that sort of stuff, running back is probably the most secure position offensively, right? Other than, I don't actually know. I think it's probably more secure than quarterback. Yeah, because Bo Nix to Ty Thompson is a bigger drop off based on what we've seen than Bucky Irving to Noah Whittington, or Noah Whittington to Jordan James, or whatever combination you would have in there if an injury did materialize. So I like all those guys, and I think the ability to maybe go five deep. I don't expect we'll see Lamar other than in maybe blowout games this year. I could see Dowdell getting more carries, but I don't think it's going to be easy for sure. Drop your thoughts below, YouTube comments. You can also shoot me a note as always at Twitter at Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. Let's hop into the mailbag here. Last week we were talking about quarterback recruits, and one guy who Oregon appears to be in a good position for is a guy by the name of Luke Moga, who's a 3-star quarterback recruit whose high school highlight film, when compared side by side to Mariota's, they do have some similarities. I think Mariota showed a bit more in the arm strength department, was maybe a touch faster, but a lot of the same plays, similar styles. And Mariota was a touch bigger as well, but plenty of upside there. So the question here came in from John, not about Moga or Mariota, what they could be, but the question came in, a fascinating one, to make a point about recruiting rankings, and guys can get overlooked and all this sort of stuff. And this was a fun question to answer. And John asked, what's your top 5 quarterbacks in the modern era that came out of high school underranked? Do you put Herbert and Mariota on that list? Does Herbert rank above Mariota when you factor in NFL performance? So when I went through my list here, John, I did not factor in NFL performance because those are completely different leagues. The rating system that we deal with for high school recruits is for their college prospects. So I went through and found quarterbacks who I felt were under recruited based on what they did in their college careers, not what happened at the pro level, because you can have a guy who might not fit as easily at the college game because generally speaking, you don't have as high level of coaching compared to the NFL. That's kind of the consensus. There are a lot of outstanding coaches in the college ranks, but it's widely considered that the best coaches are in the NFL. So they're able to take guys with physical traits and coach them up, I think, a lot more easily. But if you're just talking about, their college careers and what their recruiting rankings were and all that sort of stuff, maybe biased here, but for me, Marcus is an easy number 1. I mean, he was kind of a nobody recruit. He was just kind of a guy. He became the best player in the history of the program and won the only Heisman Trophy in school history. That's pretty darn under recruited. So I would put Marcus at number 1. Now, number 2, again, I told you I did some digging here. Number 2, I've got Kellen Moore. I've got Kellen Moore at number 2 because he was also just kind of a 3-star guy, just seen as a quarterback you put in the room. Maybe he starts, maybe turns into a decent player and whatnot. Kellen Moore's stats, I know he was playing in the WAC in the Mountain West, but Boise State was consistently a top 10 program when Kellen Moore was there. And that dude played in big games, and he showed up, and he won a lot. He had one of the best college football careers at the quarterback position in the last 20 years. Easily. Power 5 schools didn't want him. And you look at some of the quarterbacks that went other places that were highly rated, you'd look back and say, yeah, Kellen Moore was better than those guys. His numbers, his win percentage, his ability to elevate that program. How many other guys? Think about this. How many other quarterback prospects coming out of high school, highly rated or not, could have been at the center of elevating a program in Boise State or keeping them at that level, after the '07 Fiesta Bowl win. But when they elevated themselves into a place where they were consistently in the top 10, how many guys, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, could have done that? I don't think very many. And so I put Kellen Moore at number 2. Number 3, another Heisman Trophy winner. Could have put him in number 2, but Moore was just so dominant. I put him there. Johnny Manziel was not a big-time recruit coming out of high school. He's small. He doesn't have a big arm. And he's a great example of why I don't, factor in the NFL career, because Johnny Manziel's NFL career and his prospects in the NFL were, of course, disastrous. I mean, it was a complete and total failure for him at the quarterback position. But in college, that guy was really, really good. And he was just kind of like a middling 3-star recruit. I think his star rating or composite rating on 24/7 was actually similar to Luke Moga's. I'm not saying he'd be Johnny Manziel. I'm just saying don't write these guys off just because of a star or a composite rating coming out of high school. But Manziel was, kind of the face of college football for a couple of years. I mean, the Alabama wins and crazy plays, like Johnny football, that was the thing. So Johnny Manziel, number 3. Number 4, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, didn't even make it. I might have him low on this list. Now, again, I'm just looking at college careers here, but he won 18 games in 2 years at Cal, back when they were good with Jeff Tedford. But he went to junior college first. So Mariota went to a Power 5 school. Manziel went to Power 5. Kellen Moore went to a big-time G5. Aaron Rodgers went to junior college first. And then he went to Cal, and he was really good, turned himself into a first-round caliber draft pick as a quarterback, won a lot of games there. So I'll put Aaron Rodgers at 4. And then I put Herbert at 5. The thing, now for a lot of you Duck fans out there, Herbert might be too low on this particular list of mine. But the reason I've got him there is he was not a guy who came in and was obviously he was under recruited, right? I mean, you look at the schools that had offered him that he was considering. His only other big time offer, I think it was Montana. He was wildly under recruited, no doubt about it. But he also came in and did not earn the starting job right away. And when he did start playing as a freshman, showed a lot of potential, but also at times looked like a freshman. I mean, I was at that crazy Cal game in, what was it, 2016, in that dreadful 4-win season that we had. Now, Herbert made some spectacular throws. He also had, I think, like 3 interceptions in the game. Like, he played like a freshman. So being a raw talent coming out, I think that was a fair assessment. Now, should he at least have been a 4-star guy because he's 6'6" with a big arm? Yeah, of course. You know who I forgot to put on this list? And it just popped into my head because these two guys get compared a little bit now in the NFL, is Josh Allen. But I think Allen would go on my honorable mention list here because his college career wasn't that spectacular. He struggled against Power 5 schools. He ended up going to Wyoming and didn't do anything revolutionary there. But this again goes back to my point of why I separated the college ranking and the NFL ranking, because those are they're different sorts of evaluations because they're different leagues, different coaches, different defenses, like all that sort of stuff kind of varies there. But Herbert obviously came in and helped build the program back to a Pac-12 championship and Rose Bowl level. And compared to where it was when he was a freshman, yeah, let's just say it got better. He was most definitely under recruited. So I got Herbert in there at number 5. I could maybe swap him with Rodgers, but the JUCO thing, like JUCO, junior college football, and Aaron Rodgers, yeah, I think Rodgers should probably get the nod there. Honorable mention on this list: Russell Wilson. Again, maybe Josh Allen, but Russell Wilson was a borderline 2-star recruit. He barely got above the threshold to be a 3-star. Yeah, look at what he did in his career. NC State won a lot of games. They went with Mike Glennon anyway, and then he went to Wisconsin, of course, took him to a Rose Bowl. Didn't go very well for him. Anyway. Who'd they lose to in that game? Oh, right. Ducks. Anyway, so Russell Wilson, definitely in there. I put Herbert above him for semi-obvious reasons, but also Herbert won a Rose Bowl. Russell Wilson did not. That's the way it is. And then Patrick Mahomes too, because again, NFL, college, very different. Mahomes, had a decent record in college, but it wasn't incredible. But if you'd put him at a place like Alabama, yeah, you probably could have done some special things if more people had known about him, knowing what we know now. But anyway, that's the list I compiled. That was a fun question. I like that one, John. Another John, different John. That was just John who asked that question. This one coming in with the NBA basketball angle here. And I'm going to talk about the two transfers on tomorrow's show, Devin Cambridge and Kario Kendo. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I'm going to figure out how to pronounce it correctly. Make sure I'm doing that for tomorrow's show. But this question on the basketball front came from John Takeuchi. Hey, Spencer. That's me. What's your opinion on Dillon Brooks with the whole LeBron trash talking and being ejected for the hit below the belt? I always loved watching him at Oregon, but it's kind of disappointing to see him acting like this. Dillon Brooks, first of all, never a fan. Like, I defend instigators at some level. Shots below the belt. Not cool, not chill. Don't do it. Never okay. Not defending it. Now, that said, this is pretty similar to the guy Dillon Brooks was when he was at Oregon. He was not a well-liked dude. I've got Oregon State friends who have hated him since he started playing for the Ducks, not just because of what he's done recently with the Grizzlies, talking about LeBron and he's old and he's not as good and and all that sort of stuff, and then struggles in game 3. I'm stoked for game 4, by the way. I hope that series goes 7. It's one of my favorite series in the NBA playoffs right now. But the whole thing with Dillon Brooks is, yes, he makes some people uncomfortable who go and rant about him on Twitter. He's this, he's that, he's all that sort of stuff. I'm a Portland Trail Blazers fan, as I mentioned earlier. I would love it if Dillon Brooks were on my team. And what you touched on in your question here, John Takeuchi, not regular John. Sorry, I had to. You loved him when he was on Oregon, but he would flop when he was at Oregon. Remember Coach K, after we beat Duke in the Sweet 16, pulled him aside about hitting the 3 as time expired when the game was already over when we made our run to the Elite 8. Yeah, he didn't like that very much. And he's got, this legendary flop that's gone around on Twitter before where he's against Utah and he's like skipping backwards and whatnot. And it's, theatrical and over the top. I get why people don't like him. But I've watched my beloved Blazers for the last 15 years not have a guy like that. And we've been in the conference finals once. Dillon Brooks, Draymond Green, they ruffle some feathers. Number one, as a basketball fan, I think it's fantastic content and entertainment. I think it's fun. It's more exciting. Draymond Green, I'm recording this at halftime of the Warriors game, actually. Draymond Green and Domantas Sabonis on the floor at the same time. I can't look away. I want to see what happens. It adds juice. It adds spice. The fans, get more into it and whatnot. You don't want people to go over the line. Shots below the belt, that's over the line. I'm not going to deny that. But guys like that who will push the envelope, I'd want one of them on my team. And yeah, you'd hate him if he wasn't on your team. You didn't hate him when he was at Oregon because he was great and he won. And winning cures a lot of ills with these guys. Draymond Green takes a lot of flack when the Warriors lose. He's just kind of a mild annoyance when the Warriors are winning. But he wins a lot more than he loses. And in basketball, you need a tough guy. You need an enforcer because he's got to be that presence at the defensive end. Dillon Brooks is that for the Grizzlies. Draymond Green is that for the Warriors. The Blazers have never had one in my lifetime. And guess what? The Blazers can't go anywhere because they can't learn how to play defense around Damian Lillard because they don't have a tough guy. They don't have an enforcer. A guy who pushes the envelope, a guy who sets the tone, a guy who your teammates rally around and your opponent rallies against. I think a lot of championship teams have had those guys now and in the past. Bill Laimbeer, the Bad Boys, and the Pistons. Guess what? People hated them. They won 2 championships. They don't care what you think. Michael Jordan at some level was that with the Bulls. Michael Jordan punched Steve Kerr in practice. Jordan would trash talk. Jordan would get in guys' face. There's a whole thing during The Last Dance, remember? And I took that personally, right? Like that was Jordan. That was part of what made him so amazing, or so I've been told. I'm too young to remember all that sort of stuff. So yeah, like I don't think that everything Brooks and Draymond Green have done has been great. I'm not going to sit here and defend it all. But overall, yeah, I'd take them on my team. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.